Dr. Ola.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. My name is Adekunle Olarejo from the Africa Center of Excellence in STEM Education, Lagos State University. I'd like to start by saying, welcome everyone again to this presentation. My teacher is here, Professor Kibukola, and of course, my teacher again, Professor Jomo. Thank you for the class we had sometimes in 2020 and the experience you shared about Kenya and the roadside mechanic. Still links so much in my brain. Thank you for that lesson. Beyond achievement of African secondary school students in chemistry, over the years, we have focused our attention in research in Africa, particularly on student achievement, underachievement in STEM subjects. And it is time we look into new trajectories of what it is that makes quality education. And then we found out that beyond achievement are the 21st century skills, cut out into different units. And our focus here are the 4 C's, one of them including critical thinking. How do we build student critical thinking skills so that we're not just building block of students that focus more on or something like an encyclopedia of scientific facts. Students who can think for themselves and become problem solvers. That was the impetus that drove this study. And then we had 3 research questions. One of them focused on achievement because we're trying to look at how do you teach this critical thinking without necessarily going out of the class content. So we looked at a chemistry concept, electrochemistry, and then through that concept was, we adopted the 50-year method to teach, to see if we can improve our students' critical thinking skills. We adopted the CADASE experimental method for the experimental phase of the study. We had the 2 instruments. One was the achievement test and the other was the critical thinking test. There was a pre-test for the 2 groups, the control and then the experimental group. We had 2 schools separate from one another to avoid undue interaction. The instruments were validated, and then as you can see on the screen, the reliability of the 2 instruments, the achievement test read 0.78 and the critical thinking read 0.79. So they were good enough for us to use. After about 3 weeks of treatment, we had our post-test, and we found that in both measures, using the Markova analysis, we found out that the experimental students performed better than the control group students. Why this? Looking at the method that we adopted, which is the cultural contextual approach, this method actually focused on the use of indigenous knowledge to teach science. And I guess that tallies with what our presenter just said earlier. So in all of this, we said to ourselves, what could be the reason why the students did better than their colleagues? And we found that one, it includes the interaction that they had with, or could include the interaction they had with their parents. They had to go home, talk to parents, and then come back to class, discuss among themselves. Iron sharpens iron, they say. So through all of this interaction that they had with the parents, with the YouTube, and with their colleagues, we had a feel that looking at what is in the literature, this would have contributed to the success of the students. And the testimonies of the students about the method through which they were taught are what we can see on the screen. While we are not saying that this one study is all in all, we are saying that it's giving us a step to say we can do more and find out if we have consistent studies or consistent results in further studies on how to improve students' critical thinking, alongside with their classroom subjects. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Did anyone have any questions? Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Were there any questions? Still have a few minutes. Go ahead, Dr. Atwater.
You are muted.
You're muted.
Thank you for that poster presentation. I just want to make sure that this course was taught in English. But many of the students' first language was not English. Am I correct?
Many of the students'
first language was not English.
Very correct, ma'am.
So how sure are you that and I assume that the test was in English.
Yes, ma'am.
So how sure are you that the students truly understood what they were reading and could answer the questions?
Thank you very much, ma'am. Well, I think to the best of our ability, first, before the instrument was used for that study, the validity, the validation process of that instrument, we did not just bring it straight into the classroom. After the instrument was validated by the experts, we took it to sample of students that are not part of sample used in the study. And then we had an interaction with them. We did ask the question, both for the test items and the critical thinking item, test them one after the other. What do you think this question says? So they interacted with us and their responses were part of what we used to get the last
no, Kunle, let me jump in there, Mary, if I may. What Mary is asking is this: the students in the class, in your class, or in the experimental class, or even the control, are Hausa, Igbo, Yoruba students. We have 250 languages in the place. So what Mary is asking is that, are you sure that the students are able to understand, like comprehend the instruction given to them and be able to answer the question in English? The straightforward answer, Mary, is that in Nigeria, the official language is English. From grade 1 through grade 3, that's primary 1 to 3, you use the local language, the mother tongue for teaching. Beyond that, it's English. So if you get hold of a primary, that's like a grade 6 student in Nigeria, if you speak English, the person will understand. So it's an official position of the Nigerian government. You deliver in English, you test in English.
But also, my other question was, he led me to believe that the test was validated. It was construct validity, but was the reliability determined?
Yes, he reported that 0.79
right,
for the critical thinking, 0.7 something for the achievement test. He reported it.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, President Mary.
Thank you very much for that presentation. We have the next presentation coming up. You'll be presenting again, correct? And the presentation is entitled Gender Difference in Students' Performance in Chemistry. Can computer simulation bridge the gap?
Thank you very much. I welcome everyone again to this presentation. What was the problem we're trying to solve in this regard? In Africa, different organizations, including the AU, are beginning to get concerned for the low participation of women in STEM subjects and STEM professions. And that was the impetus that drove this study. How do we invite our females or make more women, our girl children, to come to study and love science? Most times in our examinations, we found out that, or even in the regular classroom, female counterparts are not doing well as compared to their male counterparts. Look at the figure 1 and figure 2 on the screen. You can see the green bar that is representing the male going very, very high, and see the female participation. Look at the performance rates. This is a problem that we had at hand. And then we look at it, what can we do? How can we help? And looking at what is going on within our surrounding, looking at the penetration of technology, you would see that one thing that seems to be very comparable today is that as much as male students use phones, other gadgets in the classroom, so the female students who are doing. So we test ourselves, can we use this medium to see if we can bridge this long coming gap? And then we design the study. We had the study had 2 phases. We had the quantitative phase and the qualitative phase. So we in the quantitative phase, it was a quasi experimental study, and then we had 2 schools far from one another. We had an achievement test instrument that was built. But beyond that, is that for the experimental group, we had a computer simulation package that was used as the intervention for the experimental group. Each group had 8-minute lesson for about 3 weeks, and then after the 3 weeks, before the treatment, there was the pretest, and then after the treatment procedure, we had the post-test for the 2 groups using the same instrument. The only thing that was different between the 2 groups was just the intervention. And what did we find? 2 things. One, looking at achievement between the 2 groups, we found out that the experimental group, students who were taught with the computer simulation package performed better than their colleagues who were taught with the conventional lecture method in the classroom. Now, beyond that, to the focus of the study, we looked at the male student and the female students in the experimental group, and there was no significant difference in their performance. But when we look at their pretest, we saw that the male student performed better than the female student. And that was giving us an incline that, oh, it appears that it was the intervention that is bridging the gap between the 2. But if you go to the control group, even after they were being taught, the male students still outperformed the female student significantly, which was telling us that, oh, it appears that again, the method of instruction seemed to be a major factor in the other performance of the female student. And so we discussed the possible better performance of these students on the basis that today technology is coming in as what everybody finds flexibility with, particularly the female students, in and around our homes, in the bank, in the market, as much as what males can do with computers, female can do with it. Not only that, the computer simulation package come in a multimedia package, like a multimedia package, different colors, things that are attractive, sounds over video, and all of this. So we felt that all of these features came to play with helping the students to get more attention with the study. And the quantitative part of the study corroborated our findings. For example, student A says, sir, I enjoy the way we were taught, particularly using computer to learn and like that. So this is what we found, and that is what we have reported. What is the future direction of the study? We know that we have limitations in this study because the sample size was not so large. So our interest is to still look into more studies within chemistry and to still use computer simulation to see if we're going to have consistent results. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's great. What I'm going to do for the sake of time, if it's okay, if I'm going to move on, and then if we have some time for questions at the end, if that's okay, because I know Dr. Atwater, you were saying you wanted a hard stop at 6:15 or 6:10, or my time is 6:10, but 4:10 Pacific time. So if that's okay, may I do that? Okay. All right. So the next presenter is improving the achievement of secondary school students. How can CTCA help in ecology? Our presenter is Dr. Ademola.
Thank you so much. The problem that this study solved was to explore an antidote to the persistent underperformance of Nigerian students in biology. The study was conducted in 2 phases. The first phase was the survey of difficult concepts in biology. And for this stage, 5,032 students from Ghana and Nigeria were involved. So at this stage, we collected data by administering difficult concepts in biology to those students. And these students are from both local and from both urban and rural locations in Ghana and Nigeria. So the second stage was the quasi-experimental stage, where we have two groups, the experimental group and the control group. The experimental group had 45 subjects, while the control group had 34 subjects. The experimental group were taught using the CTCA, while the control group were taught using the lecture method. The experimental group were taught using CTCA, and we followed the 5-step processes of implementing the CTCA. So we also employ some of the indigenous knowledge to teach ecology to this particular group of students. So we follow the 5 processes of implementing CTCA. The first step is to inform the student about the topic ahead of the lesson, and the second, and also ask them to also find out from an elderly person around them about the cultural practices that are related to ecology. We also inform them to also surf the internet and watch YouTube, watch the things that are related to ecology. So the second step is at the beginning of the lesson, these students were grouped into mixed abilities and mixed sex. And in the course of this, they were able to interact with each other and exchange their cultural practices. So, and at the end of their discussion, a leader emerged who presented on behalf of each of this group. So at the third stage begins with sprinkle of humor, and practical examples were drawn from the school surroundings to expatiate the topic better to the students. At the fourth stage, the teacher, we then comes in and then come up with our own cultural practices. And at this stage, we also try to clear the misconceptions that came up at the course of the presentation of the students. So the last stage, which was the fifth step, we summarized the lesson content, and this content was sent to the student via SMS and via WhatsApp. So in order to answer the first questions, that's the first research question that says that would there be a statistically significant difference in the academic achievements of students taught using CTC and those taught using traditional lecture method? We conducted an analysis, and we found that there's a statistically significant difference in the achievement of these two groups, and this difference is in favor of the experimental group, which is the CTCA group. And the second research question was to find out the perception of students on the potency of CTCA in breaking barriers to learning of ecology. And one of the students commented that the class taught using the CTCA was so interesting, interactive, and contains well-explained lessons. So what are the reasons for the better performance of this experimental group? The reason is because the experimental group had the opportunity to relate to an elderly person, which we can relate to the scaffold that was used by Leif Vygotsky in a study. And so these students have had the opportunity to relate with an elderly person. They had the opportunity to know about the topic ahead of time. So this gave them the opportunity. And the second step of implementing CTC, the students were also grouped into mixed sex and mixed abilities. So at this stage, they had the opportunity to rub minds together and to exchange ideas. So these are some of the reasons why the CTC group outperformed the control group. So now the future direction is that the richness of this method and the findings of this study has already added to the literature. And we also feel that if CTC is adopted in teaching science in the future, it will reduce the stress science educators go through in communicating science to learners, and also to help reduce examination malpractice. And at this point, I'd like to appreciate the principals of the schools that was used for this study. And I also want to thank the Professor Emeritus, Professor Peter Okebukola, the team leader for our team, and the entire team for their efforts on this. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. We're going to go ahead and move on again. Dr. Atwater, if you can lift your camera up a little bit, I think you pressed it back down. Thank you. I'll go ahead, the next presenters, and I will add that we did start a few minutes late. So in all fairness, if we do have a couple of minutes over, I hope that'll be okay, because I think we did have a few minutes delay in getting started and getting things organized with the rooms. So if y'all could do that, that'd be great. Protocol for the development and validation of a climate change attitude instrument and Afrocentric worldview. Our presenters, Dr. Ahove and Dr. Peter Okebukula. Please go next. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the opportunity to make this presentation. The study is focused on the development of a climate change questionnaire. The major goal is to ensure that an instrument is developed that is Afrocentric in view, such that the instrument will be able to assess attitude of students in secondary schools on the issue of climate change. Now, attitude generally may asking about student attitude on the general note on the environment might not be able to specifically reflect adequately the attitude of a student on a particular aspect of the environment. But when you raise questions on a specific concept of the environment, then it could be easier to be able to predict the behavior of an individual based on the specific item you are asking them to respond to. The thrust of this study is to ensure that an instrument is developed from items that are not Western oriented. What we did in this study is to build up items on attitude that are partly from Western concepts, items that are from African concepts. And we had about 46 items in the second part of the climate change attitude questionnaire. Now, we exposed these question items to our students. We had 3 phases of validation. First was the experts. The experts who are professors in the area of environment, in the area of climate change. They were the first set of individuals that validated this instrument. Then the second set were students, secondary students who were part of the population, but not particularly the students we used in the third phase. They also went through the instruments. Now, we discovered that when the students, the 25 students that were involved in the validation process, they had to go through every item in the questionnaire. And we found out first that if you develop a statement having a Westernized context, the student may not have a clear meaning of that item. And so we had a phase in the validation process that helped to reconstruct items in the language that is easy for the students to understand, which was contrary to what experts will have said because of their level of understanding of the subject matter. So we found that some of these students were able to recast the items in a simpler language that was easy for them to use, to understand. Then the third thing we did was to do a factor analysis of the 46 items. And we had 3 groups also of the students. We have students in the constructivist group, we have students in the discussions to pictorial group, and then we have students in the usual traditional group. So you find the pictures of those students there. When we subject the item to the factor analysis, very interesting. We had just 14 out of the 46 items that exhibited 76% variance. So the eigenvalue was loaded on items that were Afrocentric in view or in context. So those were the items we found to be well loaded. So it showed us, the result showed us that students in Africa, based on their worldview, based on their contextual understanding, and from where they have related culturally for a very long time, items that reflect their worldview were the ones that were properly loaded. And so a major lesson we learned in the study is that when you develop an item for a Western culture and you bring it to the African culture, it will not work properly. Whatever data you have is not a data that is contextual, a data that will have reflected the worldview of the students. This study showed us that when you have the appropriate item, then you have an appropriate response. For instance, one of the interesting response of the student was one of the items that says, the issue of climate change is not a major challenge. We should allow God to be in charge. And that reflects for us in Nigeria, the religious perception that our students have. The African believe that there is a supreme being somewhere. When you have a challenge that appears to have gone beyond your intellectualism, of course, you need supernatural intervention. And so that was one of the items that we found that the students really worked on. Another one is law. The students also says, if we make laws and enforce them in Nigeria, then we'll be able to solve the challenge of climate change. And that shows the background of our students, and it's a strong reflection of the cultural and socio-political perception of our students. Several studies also have proved that the issue of climate change is a big deal, and that attitude has to be predicted so that behavior can be worked on. Further studies is essential here for other people to study. For instance, in the area of ensuring that their cultural language is also embedded. When we bring in cultural language or the background language for the students, it will enhance their understanding and attitude towards ensuring that climate change is properly understood and behavior can be modified so that people can have positive behavior towards climate change. Further studies will also be thinking about the issue of gender, looking at how female students can also be encouraged to have stronger behavior. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I wanted to, for that presentation, I apologize. I wanted to go ahead and get our last presenter. If we've got a few more minutes, I want to have our last presentation it's entitled STEM and Play in the Earlier Years by Dr. Tunnicliffe.
Right, good morning, everybody. It's past midnight. Yeah, I'm
Good morning.
You're still in the afternoon. I mean, it's interesting. My little cats are very curious because it's past bedtime. I'm a reader in science education at University College London, UCL's Institute of Education. And I'm actually a zoologist by original training, and most of my lecturers were all from Nigeria, actually. So I learned an awful lot about African zoology. I am a biologist and I observe. And even though I started teaching 54 years ago, teaching advanced level zoology, I'd always wondered, where did the children who came to my classes learn what they knew when they came to the classes? And it's taken me a long time to go back in teaching younger and younger children. And at last I found the answer, and it's long before they ever get to school. It's in their communities and their families. It's not in the formal education system at all. So that's why I'm talking about STEM in the early years, and it's play. Because play is crucial to the development of a child, and play is how children learn. It isn't a waste of time, like many adults do, and these days parents pressure on their children and the competition. Can they form a letter? Can they speak at an incredibly early age and so on? Play is what young children do, and it's their work, and it occurs in communities, and it occurs in their home, and it isn't a practice unique to humans. It's what particularly young mammals do. It's an apprenticeship for adult life. And one of the things I'm very keen on and anxious about is that we recognize that the play activities are influenced by the culture of their home community. And I live in England, where a lot of children just have bought toys, and their creativity and their problem solving is not of a very high level. Because in play, the actions the children are doing in their free choice play in particular are actually STEM in action. And I talk about STEM-E, STEM experiences for the very young children, 6 months to 2.5. They're having experiences which lead to later learning of various science, technology, engineering and maths concepts. The earliest children thus are in STEM-E, and they're progressively building up their skills and understanding. Now, I've done a lot of work, particularly in rural Bangladesh, in a place for actually destitute women and their children, where we encourage the women that they are the first and most important teachers of their children, and they know a great deal of science and STEM in action because they're doing it every day. And that's the message we're putting throughout the Commonwealth, because the science that is learnt in school is a very small part of science. The everyday science is very important, and we're all doing it. It's just people don't realise. The observations, if we're talking about research, were actually done in my church mother and toddler group, where the vicar asked me to go and do some everyday science with them and enable the children to actually start having these basic experiences. And from my observations and those I've made in the Caribbean, Mauritius and in Bangladesh in particular, I realized that when a child is interested in something and starts interacting and playing, the whole sequence replicates all the work I've been doing in my research, which has been in zoos and natural history museums, where a visitor engages with some exhibits but not with others. And it's based very much on the German researcher Krapp and his theory of interest. So, but the sequence that you can see on the cycle is really, they engage. And one of the problems that is very interesting is, why does a child choose to play with something and not something else? And then they explore, what does it do? What can I do to it? And it works around in a cycle. But this is just the sort of cycle that we've actually been advocating in our schools, inquiry-based science.
Dr. Cliff, I apologize. I don't know if you can wrap up. We are actually over time. So I was trying to be sure everyone got at least, about 5 minutes, since we didn't have the question answered. Did you have like one single point you can close with real quick so we could close out?
We must look at children's play, and we must recognize the STEM that's going on, and we have to educate the parents, the practitioners, and in fact, the science community. School science is not the be all and end all. And that's the message.
All right.
It.
Thank you so much. Again, thank you all to our esteemed proposal presenters. These were wonderful. I'm going to divert to Madam Chair. Dr. Atwater, can you close out for us? I want to thank you again for your patience. I apologize that we did run out of time, but thank you so much. Madam Chair.
I want to thank the poster presenters. You all did an excellent job. I can actually say that I learned something new today within this session, and that's a lot for me to say. So thank you very, very much. The next thing is, I want to remind you to tomorrow, the CADASE social event will take place at 7:45 a.m. Pacific Daylight Time, and it is going to be a treat. because Peter and his group from Africa is going to do it. And I know that I will also learn something new. Thank you again.
Thank
Have
you
a
all.
good evening.
Thank you
Take
all so
care.
much. All right,
you all.
thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.